Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heeter. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Big Brave Business Podcast. I am super jazzed about this conversation today because this is a new friend to me. We have literally just met, but although you're, I believe, taking a break from social media now, your threads speak to me. We are so aligned on so many kind of like ethics and values, and I can't wait to get into this conversation. But let me introduce you. My guest today is Neysa Garcia-Muhammad. She is a money mindset coach. She works with thought leaders and change makers to transform their relationship with money so that they can have massive impact in the world. And she's also the host of Keep It in the Group Chat, a podcast where she talks about our relationship with money, growth in business, and personal development. So I am so excited to chat with you about all of this. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It was highly anticipated. I know we planned so far in advance.
Yeah, my calendar is nuts, but we're working on it. So, just in general, one of the themes that you mentioned you wanted to really talk about, and I think probably how we initially connected, although to be honest, I cannot remember what that original thread was that I was like, come on the podcast, is this idea that healing our relationship with money actually gives us the opportunity to change the world. And that's what we're doing here on Big Brave Business. So I want to hear more about that. Will you share some kind of perspective there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know how people might say the phrase that money is the root of all evil? Well, actually, the root of all evil is scarcity. So, I'm a Black woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm queer. I'm darker skinned. Like, there's just a million layers. I have natural hair. It's just like, make life as hard as possible. And with all of those intersections, you start to wonder, like, where does all of this negativity come from? Why can't I have what everyone else has? Why are people threatened by my presence, by my existence? Why don't people want rights? And it comes down to the fact that it's because they view that when people like me have what we need, they think that they're going to have less. Ultimately, people are missing out on their core needs. They're missing out on love and belonging. And whatever ideologies they subscribe to is under this idea that, like, they can't afford for what gives them that sense of belonging, whether valid or not really sustainable. They can't afford for that to be taken away. And so that's where all of the isms, I call them, really stem from, right? It's like you wouldn't want, if you are subscribed to white supremacist ideologies, you don't want people of color to be empowered because you fundamentally believe that there's not enough for all of us to have plenty, not even just enough, plenty. That's scarcity.
Mhm.
Men don't want women to have power because they think that if we have power, they have less power.
Mhm.
That's scarcity. All these businesses, right? Social media is a perfect example. They are all copying the most successful or the perceived most successful social media platform because they see them as competition. So they literally put out features that mimic the other because they're afraid that if they take off, that their business will fail eventually. They'll end up like Sears, if you will.
Mhm.
That's scarcity again. It's just scarcity just is the root of everything that isn't working in the world. And right now, we're in a paradigm shift where, because of certain technologies, because of certain resources that we have available to, there's actually enough for everyone in the world to have a lot. I've read books by Lynn Twist who believe that there's enough for everyone to be billionaires. But if
Wow.
we don't believe that, if we don't believe in that energy, if we don't understand the time that we're living in, then we'll operate from scarcity and we'll have a wealth distribution problem. So that's why I say that healing your relationship with money changes the world. That's why I focus so much on leadership because they're in a position of affecting lives right now. There are people out here who can make one decision, one tweet that would affect millions of lives. Look at someone like Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris believes in abundance, how many people's lives would change both in and out of the United States? Right? So that's why it's for me, it's so important to get this message out because it's not just so we can pay our bills and eat out every now and again. It's so that this dread that we've inherited from our ancestors, from those that have lived on this planet before us, can finally be transmuted into something else that matches the current reality that we're in.
Wow. Okay. There's just so much there that feels exciting. And I love your passion for the topic. And I know I'm immediately thinking, okay, yes, I'm in. I want this. But I guess I'm curious. And I want to add to before I ask my next question. This is such perfect timing because, especially when you wrapped it all up with existential dread, the conversation that I just recorded right before this, so it'll come out the week before, is we ended where I said I'm going to open this can of worms and say, like, capitalism is was the answer to a question she had asked. Like, the answer is capitalism, and basically, like, I'm hurting and I'm dreaming of a solution to not hurt, and that's what we're all feeling, and everybody's hurt is going to look a little different, but that's what's going on, and that's what's going on in people's marketing, and that's where the sales psychology comes from. That's why that sales psychology works, because we're all in pain of some kind. And my previous guest, Lisa, she added, and also fear. So I feel
Mm.
like when you summarized that with like this existential dread that we're just all living with, I'm just so fascinated. And I feel like this is such perfect timing because I made a joke on last week's episode that I opened that can of worms right at the end of our episode. And now here we are, the very next
Yay.
episode where we're digging into it. So I love this. But I know my immediate thought is I'm like, okay, yes, I want that. And yes, I do have some money wounds and some struggles with money. And I'm curious, how do you start healing your relationship with money? Like, yeah, I want that. Then what?
So I have a philosophy that there's five currencies that we have to manage. We have to manage money, time, energy, emotion, and attention. All of these currencies I equate to money because they both are better off like flowing in and out. They can't remain stagnant. It's a resource that we need. It's something that we have to manage and steward responsibly. It's something that we can give and value and receive as well. So I consider all of those things currencies. And so what I do is I look at other currencies in order to heal the one that needs my focus at that time. So if money is something that you need to heal, it's really helpful to look at things like your emotion and your time and your energy. The important thing to understand is that money and time are not the same resource. A lot of people think money is time and time equals money, but that's not true. Money is an infinite resource and it doesn't belong to any of us. If it did, we would take it with us when we died. It doesn't belong to us. It's just something that we can be in the flow with or not be in the flow with or on some spectrum there. Same with time. Time is a different resource in the sense that it is how we define it. The only reason why we have time is because we need some way to measure change. We need some way to understand how to cooperate and coexist. So we come up with a concept of time. But it's not the same thing as money in the sense that it's so clearly defined. That is more of a construct that helps us understand things. So with time, I always say it's really important to understand how you define it. And it's really important that time is aligned with your priorities. with things like your energy and your emotion, energy and emotion give you information. So they're not there to be on a hierarchy of good emotion or bad emotion. They're not there to ruin your life. They're there to give you really valuable information. And it's how we communicate with our source, our higher power, however you define that, to guide us along the right path because the universe just wants what's best for us. So if we treat our emotions like the gem that they are, like a part of our human experience, and we heed the information that we're getting, then we can redirect our attention. So it might be that we need more self care. And self care doesn't mean sitting around in a hot tub with bubble baths. It might mean not talking to certain people. It might mean not engaging in certain conversations. In my case, it meant not creating social media content and spreading myself thin, and instead focusing on the platform that I get the most reciprocation out of, which is my podcast. That was a form of self care. So that will really help you reorient your life such that it works ideally for you. Usually, money, like high tides rises the ships. Usually, money comes in with that. If you see money as something that is here to hurt you, something that is here to pull the rug from under you, to pull the wool over your eyes, if that's how you feel, then we need to redirect our attention to the relationships and the circumstances that are teaching us these ideologies in our lives, address those things so that we can understand that money is not the culprit of that. It might be a parent, it might be a friend or experience in school or work. And when we can redirect our focus there, prioritize our time accordingly, honor our emotions, and listen to what they're saying so that we can address them, then things start to open up. All of a sudden, even if you just have $100, it's not just $100. It's, wow, I have $100. That's great. Or, you know what? I have $100 and that person might have $1 million, but they don't feel as good as I do. All of a sudden, the context of that money totally changes. And now your emotions aren't dictated on numbers. So what does that mean? Like that means you're not afraid to open certain envelopes that you get in the mail. That means that you can finally look at your debt and feel neutral about it. That means that you can say your price and not be scared because we've done all of this juicy inner work that allows us to neutralize how we feel in these situations. So that's why I say to look at all of these currencies, address these wounds, take the time that it needs to take. Don't rush that process. And one day look up and realize that something that would normally rock you is suddenly not even a second thought. And that's where the work starts. And no one wants to like say that because it's not very fun. It's not very fast. It's not step one, two, three, four, five. It's not that. And at this point, I'm starting to think that anyone that has like a five-step process to anything that isn't folding a t-shirt is basically lying. And maybe it's not a lie to one person, but if you put 10 people in a room, it'll be true for one person and a lie to nine. Any
Mm.
process that breaks down a massive thing, like your relationship to money, to three easy steps, I'm just going to say that that's not true. It's just not. And it's one of those things that I just, once I realized that this was going to be a nuanced process, this was going to be a messy process, and just accepted that, it got so much easier for me. So that's where you start with this messy, undefined, combobulated process where you really start to love yourself for the first time.
Okay. Okay. There's a lot here, and I'm just like taking it all in, and I am honestly riveted. I think I think where I want to go next is I feel like a lot of what you've talked about, I can understand and apply to my personal finances. So I'd love to also talk to you from a business perspective, which of course they're very intermingled. And this is something that's come up for me a lot in I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life as an entrepreneur than I ever made in a 9 to 5 or a quote unquote corporate job, right? And my lifestyle has certainly taken steps forward into like a higher level of spending as well. That's grown with me, and in some ways that's amazing. Like I have talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I got a new car in the spring, which maybe to some people wouldn't necessarily be like a dream car, but to me, it feels luxury. And every single time I get into that car, I think, oh my God, I fucking made it. Like that's how I feel every time I get
Hmm.
into the car. And that's a great feeling. Now, of course, there are times when like bills are due that I don't necessarily have that same energy, but that's part of why having that kind of feeling of luxury in my environment is important to me because it helps me regulate the emotional roller coaster of like money coming in and going out. That I like look around my environment and it's like, of course I have enough. Of course I have more than enough. Like, of course I do. So that kind of helps me feel more stabilized. And different people are going to have different priorities. And I get that. I just wanted to share my own personal. But so I can see the relationship that has happened in the development of how I feel about money when it comes to being responsible for this business and responsible for this revenue. And now I have a team, so it's also responsible for this payroll. And of course, starting day one with sales. And you talk a lot about sales. And you have this framework that you use with like 4 C's. So I'm wondering, sales is like a tough one. It's a tough, your relationship with money and your relationship with sales definitely clearly linked, but also they are your personal finances and your relationship with sales are also two totally different aspects of your relationship with money. And sales is hard to get used to. It's hard to get comfortable with and it's hard to get confident with in the beginning. So and maybe not even in the beginning, maybe even as your business grows and evolves, as you go to new levels, as you have new offers, maybe depending on where you are in your business, it never is necessarily like easy. So I'm curious if you can share with us some of your thoughts about sales.
I love talking about sales so much because everyone is so good at selling. And we don't realize it because we're not told. It's like a secret like talent that we all have and like no one saw the potential. It's like, come on. So what I mean by that is this. For example, if you and I were like talking, let's say we met at like a mastermind or a retreat or something, and we got to talking about podcasting, and you were like, this is the mic. Like, it is so easy to install. I sound amazing. And then if I ever had an issue, the service is amazing. Oh my God. And then you would like make sure that I had the link to the mic. And then you'd be like, how's the mic going? And you basically sold me on that mic. It would just be like, you wouldn't have any resistance to that. That's how we are with things that work for us, with things that we really believe in. And it could be something as small as like a scrunchie that we use that doesn't snag our hair. Like there's a million products and services in our lives every single day that we have no problem talking about. And we love to solve each other's problems. We love to say, oh my gosh, you haven't seen that movie? You have to see it because you love this genre, or you haven't read that book? Oh my gosh, here's the link. It's available on Audible. We do that for each other all the time. Then we forget that our business is the same thing. Then we suddenly like put all this story around our business. And maybe some folks don't really believe in their offer as much as they believe in the services and products that they use in their every single day life. And that's an issue, right? But when you really believe in something, when you've seen something work, when there's no resistance behind what you know can happen with your offer, even if it's for something as seemingly small as, oh, it doesn't snag your hair, sometimes that is all that it takes to be like triple the rate of the average. Is like it doesn't do this random annoying thing that everyone's used to tolerating. So when we look at sales in our business, First, it is understanding that we're fully embodied in our offer and in the value that it gives. We have no like question about that. And as we're navigating the world, whether it's online or in person or in our personal network, as we're having conversations, which we do every single day. And so when you put down what we were told sales is, which is like this arduous follow-up stream and this like weird way to show up in the world and having to let go of who we are, then yeah, no one wants to do that. No one wants to not be who they are. No one wants to make people uncomfortable. And if you think that that's what selling is, then of course you're going to have resistance to that. But if you really understand that all selling is being of service and helping people do something that they want to do already, that all you're doing is providing value, no matter how big or small, but you're giving something, giving someone something that they really want and it's going to benefit them, then selling gets real easy. It gets very, very easy. Selling is going back to being who you are, being helpful, being of service, and like being cool. That's what selling is.
It's funny because I definitely learned about sales in a lot of different contexts. I had a sales job straight out of college because I couldn't get a job at first related to my undergraduate degree. And I took a job selling cell phones at Verizon. So I first learned about sales really there. I mean, I certainly had other jobs that involved like retail or whatever, like literally included selling, but that was the first time I had like sales training, I would say. And it didn't feel good and I didn't like it until I gave my 2 weeks notice. This is the funniest thing about that job is that once I had given my 2 weeks notice and I knew I was leaving and I was going to another job, so it didn't matter anymore. I showed up so boldly and confidently and sold more in those 2 weeks than I did in any previous month that I had worked there. So
Wow.
cool because I ended up with like a good commission check to say goodbye to working there. But then also, how funny that that took the pressure off, that having to continue to show up every day is part of why I was like in my own way with sales. But another big part of it was definitely it wasn't my product or service. And there were things about it that I liked, but I wasn't like, I don't know, a shill for my company. Like I didn't really care about it or feel passionately about it. And yes, I could come up with connections to solve people's problems with the products that we had, but I didn't really care. So I went from there to working for a nonprofit. I worked for Girl Scouts, but I worked at first in the retail shop where they sell like uniforms and t-shirts and things like that. So some of it is like supplies that people need who participate in Girl Scouts. And from a sales perspective, like that's more about selling membership than it is about like that somebody else was doing that. But then there's also when people come in for uniforms, we're trying to encourage them to get like fun t-shirts and accessories and stuffed animals and holiday ornaments and all kinds of things. And I was able to apply my sales psychology and my sales training from Verizon to this role in Girl Scouts, which I loved way more, was way more passionate about. In this case, I was a manager, so I was leading a sales team. So I was trying to help them use some of the same kind of, I guess, techniques or strategies, but about something that we all love and believe in. That definitely made it easier to sell. What's crazy about all of that is when I started my company, my own company 5 years ago, I knew at this point I had had several jobs with different contexts of sales training, and I knew kind of like, quote unquote, what to do. But really, all I did was show up and have authentic conversations with people about what I had to offer. And then, as I got a book of business that was getting results, then it became about I'm really, really confident when I show up to a sales call. I know what I offer has value. I know what a good job my team does. I know how much value I am offering. I know that. I have no question about that. So then it's just literally a matter of like, is this something that you want to do? And do you feel like when you do it, you want to do it with me? That's literally
Right.
it. And I am so confident and comfortable. And actually, sales calls, quote unquote, are like my favorite thing in my business now. It's interesting because now I have a sales team. So I'm like taking myself out of the sales call equation. And part of the reason I resisted that for so long is because I love it. I love those
Yeah.
conversations. I love getting to meet people and just truly chat of like, what are you looking to do? This is what I do. Does that line up? And if so, we can geek out together and be excited. And if it doesn't line up, there's no love lost. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, that energetically is like a huge shift. So it's really interesting, kind of the relationship with really loving what we offer. And I love that you compared it to like we sell all the time. When you love something or when you feel enthusiastic about something, when you go to a restaurant that you think is great, you'll tell everyone that they should go there. You'll take
Everyone.
people there, right? Like you
Yeah.
want to support them. So, and even like on behalf of other people's businesses, right? Like I don't want this local shop to go out of business, or I don't want this local restaurant to go out of business. So I'm going to push everyone to go there as much as I can. So yeah, it's interesting. That's a really interesting concept. Let's talk about the 4C words that you use to talk about sales, because I think this is so important and relevant.
Yes. So the four C's that I talk about a lot is clarity, consent, context, consistency, and I lost my count. Clarity,
That's
consent,
four,
context,
but if you
consistency. That's
have
four.
more,
Yeah, I was like, there's so many. So those are the four, right? So I'm going to start with consent. Consent is the most
I'm so
important
glad that's
thing
where I wanted to start.
because this is the part where if you have like an issue with sales, like if you feel like I don't want to do that, it feels icky, throw a little consent in there and the ick is gone. The
Totally.
ick is gone. That is the cure to the icky feeling is consent. I love consent. When we're having conversations, it's like, I'm a hugger. Can I hug you? Yes, that's the best hug that you'll receive. Do you want to do this? That is the best feeling because then you get to opt in. And then there's no confusion, right? So consent, like ask people consent for every little thing. Ask them like, I have a link. Can I share it? It doesn't have to be the most dramatic proposal ever. It could just be like, do you want me to share this link? Do you want to talk about this more? Like if you're going back and forth in the comments and it's turning into a whole thing, ask them like, do you want to message more about this privately? Do you want to get on a call to discuss this? I can give you 2 hours of my time. And that'll tell you right then and there everything you need to know. No more ambiguity. No more what is this? No more what are we? Literally ask consent and you'll know. And then when people say yes, they're serious. There's no like, I don't know if they're ready. They would have told you by now that they're ready. You talk about conversions going up. Consent is like the thing. When people say yes to stuff and they opt in and they tell you explicitly, this is what I want. I want to continue this conversation. I want more information. I want to discuss this. I want to learn more. Like that is the game changer. That is a game changer. So consent is a big thing and it literally removes the ick. Clarity.
Wait,
Clarity
let
is
me
another one.
sorry, wait, let me jump in real quick before we do other ones. Let's talk about let me respond about consent. I want to really underline what you said about consent takes away the ick. That is the best way to describe this. So I had a guest, Stephanie, a few months ago on the podcast who was talking about trauma informed marketing, and I said everybody uses that as a buzzword. What the heck does it mean? And they shared 7 principles of trauma informed doing business from a trauma informed perspective. So if you missed that episode, go back and find it. But I one of the principles was consent, and I got so hung up on this, and I it has really resonated with me since then because of exactly that the thing I underlined, that it takes out the ick. When I hear sales advice or sales training or business coaching, or I'm reading a book, right? I've shared on here, I've been reading a lot of business books lately. I've been diving back in. I took a break from it, but I've been diving back into them. And one of the ways I can tell when something feels icky to me is I ask myself, does this feel trauma informed? And one of the biggest things is, does this feel like consensual marketing? And when I
Mm,
take issue with something, it's usually because there's something inherently about it where a participating party, the person you're selling to, doesn't have a chance to consent to this. And I think that that is just so important. So even when we're thinking about things like running paid ads or doing cold outreach or things like that, like when it feels icky, ask yourself how you can incorporate consent into what you are putting out there. And that seriously will make it feel so much more ethical and aligned. I just love that so much.
It is huge. I feel like with sales, with this, like, it feels like a new wave of sales that's happening,
Yeah.
that's rumbling, right? We're bringing back the people of it. We're bringing back the feminine. We're bringing back the friendly, and that feels so much better. And it
Yeah, totally.
works, right?
Totally.
Like when you go to like a dealership, like this is why I love luxury things, because I wanted to circle back to you getting like a nice
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
When you go to like a nice dealership, they're just like, want some coffee? Here's some snacks. Let me know when you're ready. And they like don't care. Like they're just like, they will give you a test drive. Like they're not pressed at all. It's almost like you're like, damn, are you trying to make money today? And that makes you want to buy more. That makes you like
Yeah.
double your budget. You're like, oh my God, like they told me to think about it. Like, what do you mean? Like, I want this
I
car.
trust you.
And I
Yeah.
trust you because clearly you have no agenda, right? Clearly you have no skin in this game. And when I want to engage, you're there for me. Any safe relationship has that undertone. So sales is no different than that.
That's such a good point. Every safe relationship has that. I'm thinking about my relationship with my partner. And one of the things that we always have said to each other from the beginning is that we want to be together as long as it's easy and it feels good to be together. I want what I want. And as long as you fit into that, we get to be in each other's lives, and that has to be mutual. We both want what we want. We're individual people, and as long as that overlaps, as long as it's compatible, we want to be together. And we've also both been through really, really rough breakups in the past, and we have said to each other all along also, I know I'd be okay if this didn't work out, and I know because I have proof in my own life. So
Yeah.
there's an understanding and an assumption that if this no longer serves us, we get to leave. But that's
Yeah.
also mutual. If it no longer serves him, I would want him to leave. I wouldn't want him to stay if it didn't serve,
Right.
right? I want that for him. I want it to serve him, obviously. Like I want
Right.
to be in relationship with each other, but only if it serves both parties. And I think
Right.
that's such a cool parallel to take into sales. Like I only want to be in relationship with a client. That sounds weird, but I only want to be in a sales relationship, a business relationship with a client if it serves both of us. That's important.
Absolutely.
And as soon as someone raises their hand to say this doesn't serve me, I would want them to remove themselves from the situation. I want that for them.
That would be the
Interesting.
kind thing to do, right? It's like that's the kindest, and no one wants, like, if that statement for anyone who's listening makes you uncomfortable of like, oh, they can never leave. Who all else would say a statement like that?
Yeah.
Just think about the type of person that says you can never leave.
Or I'll
What might
manipulate the
make them say that?
situation to make you think you can't, or to make you think you need me, or to make you think that you'd be worse off without me. Like
Without me. That's
you,
abuse.
yeah. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, you have so many other cool things to dig into, though. Let's talk about clarity. I'm sure they're
Clarity.
all related.
Of course, right? Now that we know that we both want to be here, we can look for clarity, right? Clarity gives us a roadmap, right? Clarity is, oh, okay, now I understand what's going on. Now I understand expectations, right? So if you're like, you shouldn't be asking yourself, what should I do? Should I reach out? That should not be a question. You should know what the next steps are. You should know what the expectations are because you're asking for consent,
Mm.
right? So clarity is also the premise. Clarity lets you know like why we're all here today. Like it's like the plot of the movie. We're here today to talk about whether or not you want to work with me. Like, we're here today. I didn't go from a connection call to like diverging into a sales call, not without your consent, not without your explicit instruction, right? Clarity is like, I shouldn't be surprised that you're following up with me because I gave you permission to do that and I asked you to do that. Clarity gives us a path forward, right? So in a lot of ways, it's an intention, right? So you in your relationship, you have the clarity and the understanding that this is the condition that is required for us to be together. Like every sales relationship needs that clarity. When you don't have that, then you're left not knowing how you can best show up in the relationship. You're left not knowing, like, should I call? Should I email? Should I give them this? Do they want this from me? That's missing clarity. Now we don't know how to serve. Like, do I give them a test drive in the Porsche or do I let them just look in the showroom for now until they're ready? That could have been like a clarity thing, right? When you don't have clarity, you don't know how to serve. And when you don't know how to serve, you're going to miss the mark. And that's how you lose the sale or you bring in an unaligned person. And then everybody gets upset, right? So that's where clarity comes in. I feel like all of these things take the ick out, but
Yeah.
like, but that's where clarity comes in.
I think that's so good. And to be clear, I think I want to emphasize here that that doesn't mean don't follow up with people, like wait for them to come to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that you could establish through consent and being clear about your intentions mutually about what the next steps are. So, like, if you had a really great date with someone, the perfect date with someone is going to end with making plans for when you're going to
For
see
the
each
next
other
date.
again. So
Yes.
then you know that it's okay to continue to follow up and continue communication with that person because you're going to see them again. That's the point. That's the intention, right? So ending a one of any conversation with a prospect with the clarity and the consent of like, hey, we both agree we want to continue communicating, right? Like you maybe haven't even necessarily made a decision about your timing or your priorities or your budget at this exact moment in time, but like we both agree that we're going to continue in relationship with each other. We're going to continue courting as it is, as it was, right? Like we're right. We both agree on that. And as long as you're clear about that at the end of one conversation, there is clarity that you are allowed to follow up. It's welcome. It's accepted. You're not being overbearing by following up. It's wanted. It's desired. This person wanted to enter this conversation with you and to consider your offer, consider what you have to offer. So you don't trick them onto the call,
Right.
hopefully, right? So they actively engaged in this process with you until they tell you, no, thank you. Please don't contact me. Right?
And
Like, I
it
don't want to
builds
continue talking.
trust. It builds that trust of like, oh, I know what's going on. Like I always say that when I met my husband, the thing that I immediately knew was different about every other relationship was how much clarity there was every step of the way. I never
Yeah.
once thought, I don't know what's going to happen. Never once. And
Yeah.
that's how I knew.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. What's next?
Next is context.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
this is something that so many of us are missing is the context, right? Now, Threads is an interesting place because people love to like talk shit about all of the terrible service providers that they've ever worked with. People love to be like, "Oh my God, I spent 50 grand on a coach and it was not worth it." The context was really missing there. What happened? What did you go into that relationship expecting? What did they agree to? What did they promise? Did you do the work? Did they deliver? Were you in a codependent relationship with them? Did you expect them to solve something that their service doesn't solve? Were there other things going on in your life? We need context. You need the context of who it is that you're serving. And so this is where we get to talk about ideal client in our niche. A lot of people think niche is like, I work with small business owners who own laundromats. That is not a niche. right? My niche is that I work with leaders who want to create change in their organization with conscious and self-aware leadership. That is a whole context. That's a situation. Your niche is a situation. It is not a person who dresses a certain way, who drives a certain car, who lives in a certain place. It is a person who is in a particular condition that is ideal for you to get the result. So if it's ideal for you to work with people who are making 500,000 a year and maybe they have certain things figured out, but there's just one little piece missing that they can't see that you can easily fill in, and then it's like we're cooking with gas. That needs to be the exact condition, the exact qualifier that you're looking for. Are you in this stage? Are you in this situation? And if you don't have to like explicitly give them the mouthful, this is where storytelling comes in. This is where you're like, let me tell you about a client I worked with. And they had a business that was doing this in revenue. They were confused about this little piece in their marketing. Once we got down to that confusion, we were able to clarify that. And then they were able to triple their revenue. Now, all of a sudden, you're not saying 3 times your revenue, period, with no context. Now you're telling the full story about what kind of person can expect that kind of result. First of all, that makes you look better because more people will get the result, if not all of them, because you're very specific about the conditions that are necessary for you to be ideal with them and for them to get the result. And then your results are better. But if you're bringing in people who are new to business, maybe they have the savings, maybe they transition from a 9 to 5 and they can afford your rate, but they're not in the condition, they're not in the situation that's ideal to get the result, then it doesn't make sense, right? So understand the context, ask for the context. And here's what I love about looking for context too, is it is a beautiful premise to a sales call. So when you're talking to somebody and they start circling around and start expressing interest, you can ask questions to get the story. Be like, so tell me about this. How long have you been doing this? What is, just tell me what the problem, what have you tried before? What do you have in place currently? Just that conversation alone can give so much value for people because it's not often that they sit down and like lay everything out. So just that conversation alone can be a converting conversation to get the context. And then imagine if at the end of that you go, you know what? I don't really think that this is ideal for what I do. Let me support you in these other ways. Imagine how much more they're going to trust you now. Imagine what happens when they come back in 6 months or a year and they go, you could have just taken my money. You gave me support. Now I'm ready. Now they're going to pay whatever rate you're at now easily because there's so much trust there. They're going to refer a friend who is in that
Yes.
condition. Context is everything. Context converts. Like as I'm even like processing this, I'm like,
Yes.
context converts, if not with this person, with the next one, because you're handling things with such care and responsibility.
I was thinking exactly those two things. Number one, I was thinking conversions. And like for sure, I'm thinking about how I can apply this to my own messaging, how I can apply this to our content strategy, how I can ensure that this is what's happening on those sales calls in the workshop that we offer. Because we offer a free 90-minute strategy session for anybody who's thinking about starting a podcast, right? So it's like 45 minutes of like a workshop strategy session and then time for Q&A. And then, of course, we review our services like a sales call. So, in making sure that that's incorporated into that experience where we're really, I mean, it is, but making sure that it's really, really, really clear how that's incorporated into that plan, I think is really good. And then the other thing that I was thinking as you were talking of like referrals, like for sure, somebody who has an experience like that and doesn't end up working with you then, or maybe ever, they're going to refer people to you. Yeah, that's huge. Okay, what's the last one?
The last one is consistency. You can't
Mm.
just do this stuff once. This has to be like your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
right? This has to be like your way of being. Instead of talking about what you saw on Love Island, you need to be talking to people about the context of their life, right? Be interested. People say, like, if you want to be the most interesting person in the room, be interested in other people. And you don't have to be an extrovert to do this. It's a way of being. It means that you treat people with care, you're curious about them, you want to get to know them. This stuff is going to come up. Entrepreneurs love to talk about their business at every level. I don't care if they're at 10 billion in annual revenue. You sit next to them, they're going to get to talking about it. It's such a top of mind thing, right? Same thing online. Like we see that on threads every day. People are always like, oh my God, I'm working on this. Like people are like brainstorming every single day. So when you get curious about people, when you get excited that we're sharing ideas and that we're connecting, that is where all of these pieces come together. You're getting the context, you're getting the consent, you're establishing a foundation of clarity, and you do that consistently. You do that all the time. It's not just once. Oh, I sent that email once and I don't understand why I don't have consistent 10K months. Okay. You went on a walk once and you don't understand why you're not in shape. It's like, friends, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you like don't put it down ever, but it means that it's integrated in your way of being or your company's way of being. That is what creates momentum. That's what creates a wave. It's a lot of little things coming together to work. And it's only hard at first. Like once you realize that it's a very natural thing for us, like I said earlier, like we're always doing this. Once you realize that it's no different than recommending your favorite restaurant, and you're like, oh, okay, I can drop all of this heavy weight and worthiness thing.
Yeah.
I can let go of that and just be me and just consistently show up, be curious about people, move in integrity, then you'll find yourself doing it all the time. And you establish a habit. And imagine having a money making habit. Like, that's going to be
Yeah.
so amazing for you. So, what I love about all of these C's is that it has nothing to do with what you believe about yourself. It has nothing to do with you, actually. Like, you could be in a dumpster fire in your life right now, and all of these C's would still work because it puts all the focus on the person in front of you. And that's what I love. I never am here to tell people you just really need to like believe in yourself. You really just need to like have high self-worth. Notice all of this focus is on the other person. When you start taking action in this direction, the self-worth is going to come because you're going to notice that you're divorcing your needs from other people.
Mhm.
You're going to notice that it's going to come from you. It's going to come from the confidence comes from action. It's not something that you need first. It's something that is a result of something. So once you start incorporating this, this is like literally you being a more charming person. Like not in the charm that we're sold on, the real charm where people go, wow, that conversation was so like you're gonna leave an impression on people. This is you like navigating the world that in a way that leaves a mark. You're gonna be a very memorable person when you start doing this.
I love this. Okay, I'm going to be reflecting on this for a while, and I'm just so excited to have met you. And I already know I would love to have you back on again, and we can chat about more and more things because I feel like we could talk all day. I think this conversation has been super helpful, and I hope to you listening that you have as many takeaways as I do. But I like to end all of these conversations with the same kind of happy question, which is what is something that is bringing you joy right now?
Ooh, something that is bringing me joy right now is my wellness routine. Actually, this morning I did an ice bath and I'm so excited, something I nerd about a lot. And I finally figured out my little hacky way to like get enough ice because that's always a challenge is like, where am I going to get that much ice? So I finally started like recycling containers that I would normally put in the recycling to use as vessels to create ice. And so now I can get the tub like really, really cold. And it always leaves me feeling so energized and so excited and so regulated. And like just like before this call, I was like it felt like I took like an energy drink that actually works. Like it felt like I had coffee, and I know coffee doesn't do that. Like it just, I get really excited about that, and it's giving me so much joy to know that I really have the capacity to take care of myself the way that I deserve, which is something that I just, that's very new for me. So that gives me a lot of joy and honestly a lot of pride in myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. And how resourceful to have created the opportunities to have containers for ice. That's really fun. Interesting. Okay, mine. What is bringing me joy right now? I feel like so many things that come to mind feel like lame to come after a wellness routine, but I'm going to say one thing that is making me happy right now is my soda stream. So I am
Yes.
like, I am so a soda like obsessed soda drinker and I love Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi. I'll drink either, but I love it since college. Like I don't want to say it's an addiction because periodically I go without just to prove that I can. Like I don't want to be addicted to it, but I love it. It makes me happy, but it is really wasteful. And the amount of waste that's created from buying sodas, cans, or bottles or whatever is really ridiculous. Also, now that I work from home, going out to get like a fountain soda, which is the good stuff, is really inconvenient. Like it was easy to get on my way to an office, but now that my office is literally just downstairs, I mean, I have to get up early enough to leave my house to go get a soda to come back to work in my office. That just is silly. It's just a waste of time, a waste of resources. So I got a soda stream. I was like, let's give it a try. And it makes me so happy. I love it. First of all, some people say it tastes exactly the same. Some people say it tastes different. I would say I don't think it tastes exactly the same, but I like it better to the point that
Yes.
now when I am out and about running errands or whatever, my partner will say like, "Hey, do you want to stop for a soda?" And I'm like, I'll just drink from home at my soda stream. Like, I just prefer it. So, anyways, I'm a big advocate for it. Here we go. I'm selling something. If you like
There
soda,
you
I am like a
go.
huge advocate for the soda stream. It's really been great for me. And if you like sparkling water or flavored waters, things like that, you can do things other than so like Diet Pepsi, which is what I drink, but you can make all kinds of things. We've got diet lemon lime, we've got ginger ale, we've got a bunch of other things as well that we've been experimenting with, but Diet Pepsi, that's my shit. So that's what I've been drinking and I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really loved this conversation. I'm so glad to have gotten to meet face to face. And of course, if you're listening and you want to connect with either one of us, our information is all going to be in the show notes, of course, as always. But thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you and the work you do.
Yay, thank you for having me.